record button?
Yes, I did.
Okay, we're doing Julian's corner today with Julian Janetta and the scarf he has with him today, but it blue notes.
The scarf's off.
And,
He's not wearing it right now.
So he's not wearing it right now. Scarf's off, so you know things are serious.
Julian here is here to give us a breakdown of some
bit of theory lessons for the music.
Music theory.
To get the little guitarist in you to come out, tease him out a little bit, maybe touch his private parts or something. Okay, what do you have
private
for
guitar
us
parts
today?
So what I want to talk today about was what I wanted to talk today about.
Yes.
Is a progression that you often find in a lot of music, especially jazz music.
Excellent.
And it is basic. There's a 2-5-1 in the progression.
Okay.
But it is an extension of that. You have a progression where essentially it's
talking to the mic.
It's essentially what you call a 1-6-2-5 progression, and you can base it off any major key. So if I base off in the key of C major, you have the 1.
So what kind of chord you're using there? Just so that people know.
This is a C major 9 voicing.
Oh,
so for guitar players, you would have you'd be fretting on the 3rd fret of the A string, the 2nd fret of the D string. On the G string, you fret on the 4th fret, and then you fret on the 3rd fret of the B string.
Wow, very cool.
So you get a bit of like those nice colored.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Oh, yeah.
It takes me back, very nostalgic.
So instead of just having like a C chord like this, like the normal C chord, you have something like this, or you can get.
So you're taking a C chord, you're adding a D.
Adding a D, adding a B.
Oh, and a B. Wow, look at that.
Sorry?
So add a D to the C.
Yeah, so that is the chord is a C major 9, so that's why we have a D. It's
keep a straight face,
You guys.
Let's be professional here.
Let's be professional here. You guys want to redo this?
Go on with the lesson. Sorry,
no, let's keep going.
Distracting you.
Let's
D is distracting.
Yeah, let's keep going. Of course. We're only humans. We can make mistakes.
That's not funny. That's not jokes.
So when you're looking at building up a chord, so if we're on C instead of having just the 1. Whoop, I'm losing some sound here. What's going on?
There we go. Oh,
this guitar needs to be fixed. Okay. Instead of having the 1, 3, and 5, we can add 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, sharp 11, and then 13. But in this voicing I'm doing particularly, we just have the 1, 3, major 7, and then major 9. Hence, the C major 9 chord. So when we're looking at a progression where we have a 1-6-2-5, we're looking at a movement, or what we normally call a turnaround, that will progress from C and return to C. And the way it's done is through a cadence with a perfect cadence. But normally, as Matt was speaking about, he was talking about a 2-5-1, where you have in the key of C, you have D minor 7 or D minor 9, and you have G7 or G13. And then you have your C major 9. But then what I can do instead is I can add the 1-6-2-5 and add more movement to that progression.
What did you do there? Explain what you did there.
And here's that progression, right? That 2-5 to 1. The only difference is I added the 6 in the key. So
okay, good. Why?
The reason I added this is because it leads into the 2, and then to the 5, and then back to 1. We're cycling through different. We're cycling through different chords in the key of C.
Wow.
And this is done. This is done through the use of cadences and
cadences.
Well,
what's that?
A cadence is the end to a musical phrase, but we sort of...
Is the what, sorry?
It's the end to a musical phrase. So we have, in a perfect cadence, you have 2, 5, 1. In music, the 5 chord always returns to 1. Or if I'm in a minor key, that's the 5 to 1. Perfect cadence.
That is an example of a perfect cadence, going from 5 to 1.
Yeah,
really
this is a
good.
minor 2/5. So
Feels good to
in-
listen and
it's what
hear
they call
that
in
in
jazz a
my
minor
ears.
2/5.
Huh.
So it is a unlike a major key. In the minor key, you have a little bit of a difference in the way the chords are put together, but it is essentially you have a 2 and a 5, and it returns to the 1.
Can you give us an example of an imperfect cadence?
An imperfect cadence. Well, an imperfect cadence would be a cadence that has not resolved yet to 1. So the way a perfect cadence works is you go from 1 or any other chord, and it stays on the 5. So the reason why we call them cadences as well is because you get a resolution
right,
to the music. You get a resolution. So and you feel like the music wants to go somewhere. So if I'm playing this progression, the 1, 6, 2, I go to 5. You're not gonna end the music on 5.
Of course not.
You might go to a different phrase. You might do something like, or you might want to do. In which case, when you have an imperfect cadence, you can actually start a new phrase there without going back to 1. So you can do instead. I'm just continuing the 1 6 2 5. Yeah. So. See what I did there? So instead, what I did is I took that imperfect cadence and I made a new progression into a new key. So I ended up going to the 2 5 of 4. So instead of 1 6 2 5 1 6 2 5 2 5 to F. So no longer in C. It's 2 5 into the 4.
Always a great way to make a piece more interesting.
Yeah. So that is, and it's not always in jazz. You'll find that even in popular music and blues music, you'd find some of this. You'd find it a lot of. I mean, even probably music that is a combination of different styles. Like you can have. I was actually working on this pop song with this girl named Jenny, and we're performing tonight at the Dot in the Underground at York. And there's one tune, I forget what it's called. I'm just playing the chords, but it's in D flat major, and we're having a thing like a kind of vibe where it's very. I make it funky. I interpret it as funky, but it's supposed to be very pop like. That's also 1 6 2 5.
Oh, very nice.
And it's just something that's cyclical. And I can continue it with using different notes. So it's a variation. And then, of course, when you're working on the 1 6 2 5, you can. When you go to your 6th chord, you can add more extensions. You could actually make the 6th chord, which normally in the key of C major, you have A minor or A minor 7 in more of a jazz context. But you could also make it a chord that is actually dominant. So we raise a third. So instead of a minor third, you have a major third, and end up with C7. So C minor 7, C7. And actually, this has a lot more harmonic pull to the D minor 7, but we can even take the D minor 7 and make it D7 to go to G7 and then C. So we call these secondary dominants. So if I'm in C, A7 belongs to D major, and then D7 belongs to G major, and then G7 belongs to C major. I could even make the C7. I could take the C major 7 and make it a C7, or C major 9 and make it a C7. So I can have this.
Now, is that a lot of work for your fingers compared to a non-jazzy style of guitar playing?
In a way, it does require you to have the attention of... Well, it requires you to be fluent in being able to... Well, the way I've been doing it is I include a bass line. Now, this is something that has been inspired by Joe Pass, who was a jazz guitarist of the, you know, he was one of the biggest influences on jazz guitar and one of the most notable jazz musicians from the era. And using a bass line, it just, if you, especially, you know, I'm by myself here, if you don't have any accompaniment, it kind of just gives it a little more pull. It kind of makes it sound a little bit like on my own band, or duets in this case.
Right.
So in a way, it can be difficult because you got to think about what you want to do with the bass line in relation to the chords. Because what I'm doing is I'm walking a bass and I'm thinking about the harmonic structure of the progression. I'm thinking about where am I going with this, but at the same time.
So it's a lot of multitasking.
It's a bit of it's a lot of multitasking.
Constantly thinking about where you are and where you're going,
where I'm going,
where it's going to end up,
and ensuring that those two work together. So I want to make sure that the bass line works with the chords.
Yeah, for those people listening at home who thinking that Julian's making this sound really easy, it's not. There's a lot of things you got to think about all at once while performing. Isn't that right, Julian?
Well, it's gotten easier for me. I learned this a couple of years ago, and it's just been. It was very tricky to learn at first because when you're starting as a rock guitarist, for instance, you're learning how to play chords. Whoops. You're learning how to or like more funky, I guess. But you can do this. Or more like power chords.
Jazzy power chords. Those aren't very jazzy.
So there's a big difference in that.
Uh-huh.
You wouldn't do this. You want to have a bit of a nicer touch to it, so using your fingers.
Right.
Then you add a bass line.
Right, especially if you're playing with a jazz band as well, because then if you have a guitar that's too harsh, then like that might not that it's gonna get in the way, but like it might counterbalance between all the musicians at once.
Are you saying if there's a bass player in the band and
like a bass player and then a saxophone player on the side, and you get your drummer in the back, and then maybe another guitarist,
or even a piano player. So one of the tricky things too is when you're in an ensemble. So if I was in an ensemble, of course, you know, with a bass player, I wouldn't be doing that because the bass player would take that role. And if I were to have a bass line, there would, you know, inevitably this would inevitably result in a lot of clashing between my bass line and the bass line of the bass player. Because you end up with like those really crunchy intervals, and they might be very dissonant, like, you know, might get some of that. So that could happen, and you know, there's a lot of chromaticism that's occurring in bass lines, like when I'm doing like these are like I'm using like in the bass line I'm using a lot of approach notes. So if C, A, D, G, I could do this. It's all diatonic in the scale, right? But if I'm doing something like there's some notes in there that are a little that kind of are just below a chord tone, and they're meant to lead into it, but they're not in the key. So this one, like for example, this is A flat 7. this wouldn't be in the key, but it would lead to G7. Right? I'm emphasizing that A flat 7.
Right.
Chromatic, now in the key.
Right.
So there's a lot of different elements, and again, when you're playing back to the, if I was in an ensemble, for instance, with a saxophone, maybe a vocalist, maybe a trumpet player, a drummer obviously would be there. But if there was a piano player, it would involve a lot less playing on my end. It would be a lot of listening. See, jazz music, and even other music in general, there's a lot of listening, and you want to make sure that you're not trying to hog the spotlight. You're just trying to add.
Oh, yeah.
You want to make sure you add to the music. You don't want to be the person people are like, shut up, stop playing all those lead parts. Let someone else take a spin at it.
Right.
Let someone else take take the head and solo over it.
Yeah. Because you're gonna get your turn.
You will get your turn,
Yeah.
and maybe some songs might be better. You might be better just to, like, for example, if I'm comping, just comping. Meaning I'm outlining the progression, supporting whoever's soloing,
Right.
and you can hear the bass line over it. So there's a lot of elements, and if I'm playing with a piano player and they're doing something like this, I'm not going to be wanting to play this because it's just going to be like a lot of different notes clustered together. So if a piano player, if they're soloing, they're up here, then maybe I'll add something down here instead of like where they are. So you have to make sure you're staying in a range that is meant to complement.
I'm sorry, Julian, but Chris would make an excellent student here. Just like in his own world.
He's in his own world.
His own. He's pretending his legs are drums.
And even when you look,
listeners,
even when you look at sound engineers who are trying to get the most out of a recording and trying to make it sound its best, they really think about how those frequencies are arranged. Now, on a guitar and a piano, you cover a lot of different frequencies. But if you have two players, even if it's just two guitarists, you want to make sure they're not clashing. They're not both playing a G bar chord. Maybe one's doing this and one's doing this, or it just opens it up. And this just allows for more coloring without really doubling. Because when you're playing so much, if you're in an ensemble and two guitar players are playing pretty much the same parts, there can be an overwhelming imbalance in that texture, and so you hear too much guitar rather than more bass and more drums. And rather than in music, you're trying to aim for a balance between the parts. You want to make sure there's a balance between guitar, a balance with the bass. You don't want to have two bass players. You don't see two bass players in a band. That doesn't. I guess you can technically do it, but it doesn't mean
if you balance it right.
Well, from the way I'm schooled, I would never have two bass players in a band. It just doesn't work because you're gonna have those low frequencies and you're gonna have a bunch of guys doing it. It's gonna sound like what you hear on like Justin Bieber's record or whatever. I mean, not to
well, hey, look
put
at
him down or anything, but in music that is meant to be academic or meant to be something that is taken in a very serious way, you want to make sure that you're incorporating balance.
I guess in the sense of traditional performance, it'd be best to follow that.
Right.
But, I mean, look at a song like
right.
"Walk on the Wild Side" by Lou Reed.
I'm not sure.
Oh, you don't know that song?
No.
It's the very first thing. It starts off with acoustic guitar and two basses, one double bass and then an electric bass doing a slightly higher register. But it goes back to what you're
that's
saying.
what I'm saying. See,
Yeah,
you can have two bass players, but and the same with having two guitar players or having two saxophones, you can have them, but you need to ensure that they're doing something that's very different and that they're working in different registers.
Yeah. You got a contrast.
People talk about, or you hear audio engineers talk about, I need some more I need less in the 5K range. I need more in the 3K.
Right.
Now we're talking about mids, high mids here, and so
Mhm.
when you're talking about those ranges, you're talking about somewhere around in this range of the guitar,
Right.
especially. Now you're not gonna have a bunch of people doing because it can just sound really messy. But again, you want to have maybe someone in this range and have someone here. Have someone here.
Right.
And then it just so you get a
You
nice
get, like,
balance.
a
A fully rounded sound
Yeah.
within, you're using all the frequencies from about 20 to 20 kilohertz, 20,000 kilohertz, when
Right.
you get the hi-hats. And
Mhm.
they're really high and stuff.
You know what? That's a very, I feel like that's a very important point for every musician to know if they want to make music. It's good to know how frequencies work and how the instrument that you play, how the frequencies run through your specific instrument. I feel like that can go a long way for understanding how you play and understanding how the sound is emerged from your instrument.
Right, and one thing to mention as an extension of what you just said is different instruments have different timbres. So when you hear a flute, you know it's a flute. When you hear a trumpet, you know it's a trumpet. But if they play the same note, you can differentiate one from the other.
Absolutely.
Now the reason for that is there's different. If you look at a sound wave, if you're if you were to look at on a sort of DAW or some sort of digital audio workstation, I don't know what's wrong with my speaking today. It's all over the place.
No, that's fair. It's a Friday.
It's a Friday.
It's the end of the week.
It's a Friday. So they have, when you look at a sine wave, it's not just like a sine wave. A sine wave.
Speak
sine
from this
wave-
side. If
What's-
you speak here, it's not going to come out properly. But if
Oh,
you're
okay.
speaking like that,
If it's a sine, if you're looking at a sine wave, a pure sine wave is
Mhm.
what you would consider a pure fundamental sound
Right.
or tone.
yeah,
So
sine
if I'm
wave, square
playing-
wave.
That's the fundamental. But if I'm
Yeah.
playing, it's a little more colored. It's not
Right.
quite the same. Harmonics have more of a purity to them. But see, so this is like on the 12th fret. This is a harmonic of the G.
Right.
Now, if I play it, you might hear that's a little bit more. It's got a little more high end in it.
Right.
So if you were to look at a wave, if I were to record these both and look at a wave on a software for audio engineering and whatnot and recording, then you're gonna notice that there's a difference in the way that those sound waves look, and it's not so much the volume, if I were to pluck it harder or not, but it has to do with the little, very small but little notches within the actual. So think of like little frequencies within frequencies. Now those little frequencies are they have their own amplitude mean. They're not as loud as the actual fundamental sound, but you can definitely hear a difference than what you'd hear in a normal sine wave.
Right.
I'm not sure if that makes sense. We're getting to more like
No,
a
it
scientific
does.
thing here, but
I took a course 2 years ago on light and sound. It was a Nats, and so we it was a Nats course, and we just basically went over the fundamentals of sound. So we looked at oscillations and
exactly.
the shape of sound waves, the shape of a sine wave compared to the shape of a square wave,
Mhm.
and sawtooth,
Sawtooth, yeah. So it
inverse
does,
sine.
It does have something to do with that too, because they add color to
Mhm.
like synthesizers. They can add a lot of color to music,
Absolutely.
and they can help add some more frequencies in a piece of music that are missing or that you want that are not necessarily there but that you want present. So I almost like to think of it as if you know the movie Inception that
Yeah.
came out. That was a great movie. But when you have like, for example, like a dream, I think it was a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream within
Yeah.
a dream. It's kind of like that. You have like these little, you have one big dream, but then you have these little ones and they get smaller and smaller. And that's the way when you hear like a timbre of an instrument, that's the way it works.
Right. Yeah.
You hear these little ones in between, but they're still audible. They're still noticeable. But
But to you, it just comes across. But to like the average listener, it comes across as just one sound. They don't.
yeah, but this is the reason why they can identify what instrument is playing the note.
Right.
This is the reason why they can identify a trumpet and know that it's not a flute.
All right. That's
Yeah.
cool. I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much, Julian, for the lesson, the guitar lessons, and the sound wave lessons. You teach lessons here for
I
Yums,
do teach
is that
lessons
correct?
here. Yep.
Why don't you go into a little bit of detail on that?
All right. So here at Yums, York University Musician Society, I'm currently the only instructor for guitar, and I teach half-hour and full-hour lessons.
Okay.
For a half hour, we're currently teaching at a rate of $10 per half hour, and then for the full hour, it's $20.
Okay, so if someone wants to have a lesson with you, they should.
Well, you should contact me on Facebook at Julian Janetta, so you can find me JULIAN space JANNETTA. Man, I can't even talk today. I don't know what's wrong with me.
It's all good, man.
You know, it's one of those
Getting
things.
close.
It's like when you're about to perform on stage, and then like that's me. I'm gonna be performing soon. I think I'm just like getting rid of the blah blah blah. All those
Welcome back,
out of the
Chris.
way.
You know what helps with that?
What's that?
Cocaine. A
Really?
little bit of cocaine.
You know what helps? I find doing this.
But through your
helps,
nose and inward and with cocaine.
Oh, I guess, yeah. Funny guy. Matt's laughing in the back.
Okay, so before we end this off, I feel like it'd be, excuse me.
Could please send it.
That's a sign that says I should eat more food.
Is it?
Before, yeah.
I thought that was a sign that the tank is full.
No, for me it's the opposite. For me, I start burping when I'm hungrier. So to end this off, I feel like we should have a little jam session right now. How do you guys feel about it?
What key is your harmonica in?
This one, C, I think.
Alright.
Yes, C.
Alright. Can I try that out? I used to play a little bit of harmonica. That's back to you then.
Nice.
That was nice. I like that.
Noise.
I don't know.